we start, I just thought it would be a good idea to maybe just get a little bit of sense of who's here in the room and what level you and your organization is at in terms of how you use the web. So first of all, I assume all the organizations here, raise your hand, you have a website. Okay. How many of you, either individually or your organization, is using Facebook or another platform like that, another social network? Okay, most of you. Twitter? About half. Okay. And how many of you have a big email list that you're in regular communications with?
What's big?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I should say anything more than a personal list. Okay, so a list that you personally talk to each day of a few clients or the staff is not what I mean. I mean, for a small community organization, it could be a few hundred names, but that's still an email list that you're having a more general conversation with. So all of you are doing email communication. Okay. And in terms of just the size of your organizations, budget-wise, how many are, shall I say, under $500,000 annual? Okay, so some fairly small, and then the rest are bigger, I'd say. Is anybody here like $5 million or more in your annual? Okay, so a couple of larger organizations as well. Great. Well, I think, like I said, the best way to start is to dive right in. To save time, I'm not going to read the entire bio of each of our speakers, but it's an illustrious group. And they're actually going to be speaking in the order that they're sitting. Our first speaker, Harish Rao, is a good friend. At the ripe old age of 23, he went to work for the Dean campaign, where he was the Director of Information Technology for Dean for America. Since then, he's part of this very fertile explosion of talent and innovation that came out of that particular moment in time. He and a partner from the Dean campaign founded a firm called EchoDitto, one of the leading companies in the sort of combining technology and political organizing space. Some of their major clients, the Clinton Foundation, Research in Motion, the BlackBerry People, Rosie O'Donnell, the movie star, the film star. And he has now gone off and started a new company called Interpersonal Frequency, which I'm sure he'll tell you a little bit about, which is an online communications and strategic advisory firm. And Harish is going to kick us off with sort of an overview about social media in the nonprofit setting and take us through a couple of case studies.
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, I think that's...
Do you want the mic? Or you okay?
I'm all right. I can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, people project.
Hello. I will project. It's great to see the many faces here. I'm going to walk around because I like walking around. Is that all right with you? There you go.
It's fine. Just don't make us dizzy.
Don't make me dizzy. Okay, I'll stand over here for a little bit. Like Mika said, my work at IF is really focused with communications, online communications, building communities. Really, the reason I had this great, very successful firm, EchoDitto, still around. I sold my interest in it last year because I really wanted to get into the science of conversations, the science of communities, the science of moving ideas through our culture. The questions that I was getting from my not-for-profit clients, and I still have about half of my clients today, not more than half of my clients today are not-for-profit. They would ask me questions like, well, Harish, you're like the smart guy in the room in terms of social media, but how much money do I put into social media versus all the other stuff that I'm doing with newsletters or advertising or all these things? The truth is I couldn't answer that question with some quantitative rigor. So all my work over the last year and a half since I left my old company and started IF has been really in trying to answer that question with real quantitative insights, quantitative tools, and sort of quantitative research. I'm starting my PhD, my doctorate at Rochester Institute of Technology in Network Science, which isn't quite what you might think it is. Everything exists in a network. We're in a network right now, this room. This is a community of sorts, at least a temporary one for the next hour and a half. Our cells and our bodies are in networks. Communication actually happens in networks, and that's really the focus of my work. Well, let me. But my purpose here today, what I'd like to do over the next few minutes is just to sort of frame the conversation for the next hour or so. Sorry, I'm just getting a little timer started. I have a strict 15-minute goal, I believe. There's an explosion, as you all know. I think half of this room was doing Facebook, a little less than that doing Twitter. There's an explosion in social media. This is a great little chart. It's hard to read, I know. I put it up here because it's kind of overwhelming and it kind of explains. This is from a great guy named Brian Solis. I did not create this chart, he takes full credit for it. It's the explosion in the kinds of communication technologies that exist, especially social media. And you can see all of these different kinds of types. There's blogs, conversations, and all these little tools in the petals of that flower, all the way over to video, social media technologies, and documents. It's just crazy, all those things out there. And so what do we do with all of this? What makes sense for your organization? Which of these tools, beyond the Facebook and the Twitter that you might already be using, really make sense for you to be working with? Like, where is your audience? Where are those people that you want to engage with? Well, let me take a back step. These tools are cumulative. They exist to be able to provide content, push content, and engage people with conversations. But I think that's one of the key roles of social media, to engage constituents, to engage service members in conversations. And there's so much that you can measure. So going, just a quick little slide, this is talking about the science of conversation. So there's so much more that you can measure in this day and age. Here's a couple of those examples, right? You can measure things like sentiment. How are people feeling about the messages that you're putting out there? And I'm going to show you some of the tools that are out there, some of them free, some of them not so free, that you can measure these things with. You can start measuring velocity, how quickly your message is going out into networks. And I'm not just talking about social networks here, I'm talking about all forms of networks, all forms of communication. There are tools today that allow you to measure the speed of the message through a community, not just an online community, but a real world community. You have things like sentiment velocity. How quickly are those emotions changing around the messages that you're putting out there? You can start understanding influencers. Influencers is a key thing, and I'll get into it a little bit later. This is somebody who's imparting a high velocity, pushing your message out. We're thinking in networks now, right? Pushing your message out through a community quickly. That person is probably an influencer, a brand advocate, using more corporate terms. And then there's things like amplification, the spread of your message in a network, all of these things. And finally, there's actors or agents. These are advocates on behalf of your organization. These are people who so you have influencers, these are people who spread the message, and then you have actors or agents. These are people who actually take the action. It's a fundraising action to donate money, if it's a volunteer action, to get involved with the organization. These are all the things that we can measure today. I think it's an amazing world out there. But how do we put all of this contextually? It's the number one mistake that I see not-for-profits doing, not just not-for-profits, most organizations, is, very frankly, they leap before looking. And by that I mean they jump into trying to create a community around, and I'll tell you what that means with some examples here. They jump into trying to create a community around their message without first listening and engaging with the audience that's already out there.